The question a lot of new writers ask is, what should I write? But you also have to consider the other question. What should you not write? That's what we're talking about. Thank you for liking, subscribing, all that stuff. I really do appreciate it. Let's jump in. So there are some things that you should not be writing as a new writer. And it's not because they're bad for you as a writer. It's just because they're not going to service you long-term or for your career. So if you're wanting to do this as a profession and get paid to do it, these are things that you should avoid. Now, if you're not wanting to try to sell anything, you're just writing for fun, you're just having a great time with it because it's just a joy to you, then these things don't necessarily apply. But if you think you want to try to sell something, you can't really write any of these 6 things I'm going to give you. Number 1, a sequel. Don't write a sequel to any book or movie or anything like that. It's not going to get read. You don't have the rights. Just don't do it. You're going to create all kinds of heartache for you. Nobody's ever going to want to read it. It's just the end. So don't wrestle with trying to create this fantastic sequel that you want to see. And some people fall into this trap because they've seen a movie or there's a beloved franchise that they love and there was a sequel that came out and they didn't like it and they're like, oh, I wish it would have been better. I'm going to write a better one and give it to them. And that just doesn't ever end well. So sequels, out. Anything based on IP, out. Now, IP is intellectual property, so this is something that somebody would own, typically around things like sequels. So this is related, but maybe it's not a sequel. Maybe you have a great idea for another story set in the Star Wars universe. Nope, that's IP. You're not going to be able to do it. You've got to have street cred, you got to have some credits, you got to sell some things. So before you can ever have that opportunity, you've got to prove yourself. So it's just not a good idea to go down that road when you're starting out. You might want to do it and love to do it, but please don't think you're ever going to be able to sell that. Nobody's going to want to read it. Nobody's going to want to look at it. So nobody that doesn't have that IP will read it, and nobody that does have it will want to read it. So it's not going to go anywhere. So if it's IP related, that's out. Now, IP also means books. So maybe you've got a book that you really love and it hasn't been made into a movie and you're like, that would be a great movie. And it might be a great movie. But if you don't have the rights, you can't write the movie. So if you want to write the movie for a book that you love, then you want to try to go get the rights for that book. That actually will help you sell it. Okay? Because people are like, oh, I have the rights to this book and I have a script, boom, boom, all good. But if you don't have the rights, you can't do it. So it doesn't matter what it is, autobiography, a biography, a fiction book, doesn't matter. If you don't have the rights, not going to help you. So any IP, off limits. So the next one is going to be tough for a few of you. Some of you, and I'm just speaking the truth in love here, some of you are really great people. All of you are awesome. All of you are unique. But very few of you, if you were the main character in a movie, would actually make a good movie. So if you're writing a memoir or an autobiographical piece, probably not a good option. That doesn't mean it's not going to make for a great movie, and it might make for a great movie someday. But for right now, starting out, it's really hard. You have an uphill battle because people want to know, well, who's this person about? It's based on a true story. Oh, who is it? Me? Well, I don't want to buy that. I want to buy the IP that's got somebody wrote a book about and that. So if that's you, maybe you can do that. If you've got a book that's sold well, it's an autobiographical piece, you own the IP, you can go and do that. By all means do it, but you have the IP. But if it's just a memoir, probably not. Okay, the next one is a trope that's so common. Please don't do this. Please don't do this. Please don't do this. The main character is a writer. Now, I know that all of us think our life is very interesting, that a writer's life is fascinating. You know, we're dealing with all kinds of stuff. We've got characters in our heads. Some of us have issues coping with people. We're introverts trying to be extroverted, and sometimes that's really hard, and it's really interesting, and it's really fascinating, and wouldn't that make a great movie if we have a character that's a writer? No. Don't. Please don't. Can you do that? Yes. Are there some good movies where the main character is a writer? Yes, there are. But how many new writers write a movie that the main character is a writer? A lot. So just don't do it. If you do it, what happens is you're not standing out above the crowd. Somebody that's reading that script goes, it's another main character writer movie. Out. So if your main character is a writer, don't do it. Number 5, don't write a movie that you would not watch. If you wouldn't watch it, don't write it. One thing people will say is, hey, whatever movie you think you would want to go see, write that movie. It's actually really good advice, because one of the things it does is it helps you buy into the story. It takes a long time to craft a movie and to make it successful. And if you've written it and wrestled with it and draft after draft after draft, and you turn it in, you give it to somebody to read, they pass it along, you get some really good notes, you rewrite it again, it finally gets sold, now they want to make it, now they want you to rewrite it again. It's a long process, and you gotta love it. So if you don't love it, if it's not something that you would want to go see, don't write it. This is the trap. Sometimes people think, I'm just going to write this thing because that's what people are writing, or that's what I think I'm supposed to write. If it's not something you would want to go see yourself, don't write it. It will just make it harder for you as you're working on it. So save yourself the headache. If it's not something you would go see, don't write it. Last, don't write something you would be ashamed to tell other people about. When they say, I saw this other movie, I couldn't believe what was going on. Do you really want to admit that you wrote that? Now, some of you may say, yeah, I want to admit I wrote that, and that's great. But if you are just opposed to what it is, or the genre, or the type of story, don't write it. I have some friends who write Hallmark movies, and they love writing Hallmark movies, and they are happy to tell other people they write Hallmark movies. Some of you watching this might say, I would not ever be caught dead writing a Hallmark movie. And that's perfectly fine. But if you feel like you would be ashamed or reluctant to talk about what you write to other people, don't write that story. Don't write it. You want to be a champion of it. You want to love your writing. You are your best advocate as a writer. So you have to love it. So if you're going to be ashamed of it, don't write it. Hopefully these have been helpful to you. If they have, please like, subscribe, bell, all that stuff. I really do appreciate it. So thank you very much. If you're going to tell a story that matters. See you later.